Learn Japanese history.
We are your navigators, Taro and Hanako.
Welcome. Today we're diving into a really distinctive time in Japanese history.
That's right, the Kitayama culture. It's from the early Muromachi period, so think late 14th century-ish.
And what makes it so distinctive, we're going to unpack that, look at the mix of influences. It feels like a real crossroads moment.
Definitely a crossroads.
Yeah.
You've got old traditions meeting new ideas, and the name itself, Kitayama.
Yeah, where does that come from?
It's named after Shogun Ashikaga Yoshimitsu's villa up in the northern hills of Kyoto, Kitayama. That's also where Rokuan-ji Temple is.
Ah, Rokuan-ji, with the Golden Pavilion Kinkaku, that iconic building.
Exactly. And Kinkaku is, well, it's kind of the poster child for this whole culture. It really shows you what's going on architecturally.
So it's not just one style. You mentioned a blend.
Yeah, it's a fusion. You see the traditional Shindanzukuri style.
Okay, that's the high-end aristocracy style, right? Lots of nature, pavilions.
Spot on. That older court style blended with Zen Buddhist influences.
Yeah.
Simpler lines, more suggestive maybe. It's quite a contrast.
So it wasn't just about architecture looking nice, it was reflecting something bigger.
Absolutely. It shows this interplay. The established court culture mixing with Zen ideas, which were becoming really popular with the warrior class, the Buke.
And this wasn't just Yoshimitsu's personal project then, it had broader support.
Oh, for sure. Kitayama culture really took off because you had patronage not just from the shogun, but also the Shugo daimyo.
The powerful regional governors, right?
Yep.
They had the clout, the money.
Exactly. They helped create the environment for all this art and culture to bloom.
So what were the main ingredients culturally speaking? What was Kitayama drawing on?
Well, at its core, you have the traditions of the Kyubash, the court nobles. Centuries of refinement there.
Okay, the established high culture.
Right. And alongside that, a big influence from the continent, mainly China. New art, new philosophy, even new ways of organizing things, like monasteries.
Now, what about the warriors, the Buke? Were they creating their own separate culture yet?
It's interesting. Not really. Not a distinct Buke culture in the way we might think of later. At this stage, there was still a lot of admiration for the Kyu culture, kind of looking up to it.
So they were adopting aristocratic tastes.
To an extent, yes. But the Buke also brought their own energy. They're often extravagant, ostentatious, big displays of wealth and power. And that definitely shaped Kitayama culture too, gave it a certain boldness.
So refinement meets this flashier, maybe more assertive vibe?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And that leads us nicely into this concept of Basara.
Basara, I've heard that term. What exactly was it? It sounds rebellious.
It definitely had a rebellious streak. Basara was a trend, really kicking off a bit before Kitayama proper, in the late Kamakura and Enbokuchu periods. Think flamboyant, unconventional, deliberately breaking the mold, over-the-top behavior.
Like more than just fashion, a whole attitude.
Totally. And it wasn't just one group. It seemed to spread from, well, sometimes sources call them okutu, disruptive types, maybe outlaws even,
Okay.
all the way up to some of those powerful Shugo daimyo we mentioned.
So even the regional lords were getting in on this Basara act.
Oh yeah, the classic example is Sasaki Duyo. He was the Shugo of Umi province.
Sasaki Dojo, the Basara daimyo.
That's the one. People actually called him that. Picture armor just dripping with gold and silver decoration, wearing incredibly expensive imported silks, just designed to make jaws drop.
Wow. Definitely making a statement. But it wasn't just the clothes, right? His actions, too.
Exactly. His behavior was seen as totally unrestrained, shocking the establishment. He really lived that Basara spirit. And, you know, the rise of guys like him, these powerful Shugo daimyo embracing Basara, it actually helped fund Kitayama culture. They became major patrons.
It's fascinating how periods of, like, social disruption can fuel culture. Speaking of disruption, what was literature like during these times? Must have reflected the chaos.
Oh, absolutely. You start seeing things like Zuitsu essays, personal reflections. They give you these amazing, vivid snapshots of society, especially as Basara was taking hold.
Like diaries, almost, giving a personal view.
Sort of, yeah. More reflective, maybe. And the most famous is probably Kurezu Regusa.
Essays in Idleness, right? By Yoshida Kenko.
Well, yes, traditionally Yoshida Kenku, though interestingly, recent scholarship suggests his family name was actually Urabe.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but most people still know him as Kenku, Hushi Priest Kenko. His essays give a great feel for the times.
So personal essays captured one side. What about more formal history writing?
That was happening too, especially during the Nanbokuchu period, when the imperial court was split. Lots of chronicles trying to make sense of the rise and fall of the court versus the view.
Like taking sides.
Sometimes, yeah. You have the Muskogami, the clear mirror. That tells the story from the Koage, the court aristocracy's perspective, after the Genpei War.
Okay, the court's view.
Then there's Kitabatake Chikafusa's Jinjashuchiki, a really important one.
The Chronicle of the Direct Descent of Gods and Sovereigns. That sounds significant.
It was huge. Chikafusa used history to argue for the legitimacy of the Southern court in that imperial split. Very political.
And the other side, the Ashikaga.
They had their version, too, in the Bishan.
Yeah.
It tells the story of the wars and their rise to power from their clan's point of view. So you get these different perspectives on the same events.
It sounds like a real battle of narratives. And then there were the war tales, the Gunki Monogatari.
Exactly. Big, sprawling stories about life in those turbulent times, full of battles, heroes, drama, and those bizarre warriors pop up in them, too.
Any famous examples?
The big one is the Taiheki, the Chronicle of the Great Peace. Ironically named, maybe, given how much conflict it covers. It's a massive work, really captures the era's energy.
So literature gives us a lot to chew on. What about religion? Were things changing in the Buddhist world around this time?
Oh, big time. Huge shifts. The older schools like Tendai and Shingon, they'd been linked to the aristocracy for ages.
Right, the traditional powers.
But as the aristocracy's influence faded, so did some of the clout of those sects. They started to decline a bit.
So who was rising?
Well, newer Buddhist sects started gaining traction, especially with the Buke, but also with farmers, merchants, artisans, a broader base.
Any particular sect stand out?
The Renzai sect of Zen Buddhism really prospered. A lot of that was down to Ashikaga Takauji, the first shogun. He's devoted to this influential monk, Musa Soseki.
Ah, so shogunal support was key.
Crucial. And later, Yoshimitsu, him again.
Uh,
He really organized the Zen monastic system. He set up the Gozan and Jisatsu system.
Goes on. 5 mountains, Jisatsu 10 temples, like a hierarchy.
Exactly. Based on a Chinese model from the Southern Song dynasty.
Yeah.
And right at the very top, above all the others in Kyoto and Kamakura, he placed Nanzenji Temple.
Wow, so Nanzenji was number 1, and the Kyoto goes on, the main 5 in the capital.
Yeah, those were Tenriji, Shokokuji, Kenninji, Tufukuji, and Monjiji. Really important centers.
Centers for just religion, or more.
Oh, much more. They were intellectual hubs. The Gozan monks, figures like Kidu Shushin, Zekai Chushin, they weren't just monks. They were advisors on politics, diplomacy.
Really? Involved in state affairs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially with the growing trade and contact with Ming China. These monks were often the scholars, the diplomats. They were central to learning.
What kind of learning?
Well, this is when Neo-Confucianism, Zushi's philosophy, or Shushigaku as it's called in Japanese, really takes root in Japan, largely through these Zen circles.
So philosophy, diplomacy, and literature, too.
Yes. It led to what we call Gozan literature, Gozan Bungaku, mostly written in Chinese poetry, prose. These monks were producing sophisticated literary works.
And getting them published.
Yeah, using what are called Gozan editions, Gozandaban. Early printed books coming out of these temples, spreading knowledge.
So these temples were like universities almost. And did the Zen influence show up in art as well?
Definitely. Inkwash painting, Subokuga really flourished, drawing heavily on Chinese Song and Yuan styles.
The monochrome paintings.
That's right. Often done by Zen monks themselves. Think simplicity, capturing the essence. It reflects Zen principles. You get major artists emerging, like Minshu, Shubun, and later, the great Seshu.
Okay, so Zen's influence was really pervasive. Architecture, politics, literature, art. Wow, let's shift gears slightly to performing arts. This era saw things like Renga, Nu, and Kyujin really develop, right?
Yes, exactly. These collective performed arts really matured amidst all the social change. Take Renga, linked verse.
How did that work again? It's collaborative.
Yeah, it's fascinating. People take turns adding verses, linking their lines thematically and poetically to what came before, usually following the 5-7-5, then 7-7 syllable structure of waka.
The poetic conversation.
Kind of.
Right.
And it got serious recognition. Nichi Yoshimoto compiled the Tsukubashu collection, which basically elevated Renga to the same artistic level as classical waka. A big deal. Okay, and then there's Nu. Where did that come from? I've heard Sarugaku and Dengaku mentioned as precursors. Right. Both Sarugaku and Dengaku started out linked to Shinto rituals. But over time, they absorbed all sorts of performance elements.
Yeah.
Music, dance, mime, acrobatics.
So they were pretty lively, varied forms.
Yeah, quite diverse. And Nu gradually emerged from Sarugaku, becoming more focused on song, dance, and drama. More refined.
And how did it become the nun we know today?
Well, performers started forming troupes, nuv, often linked to temples or shrines for patronage. This is the Muromachi period.
Guilds, sort of.
Kind of like guilds, yeah. And one troop, the Kanzi troop from Yamato province, became incredibly important thanks to two figures, Kanami and his son Zeami.
Ah, Kanami and Ziyami, the big names in no history.
Absolutely central. They got patronage from Shogun Yoshimitsu, there he is again, and they're credited with really perfecting Saragaku noose, shaping it into this incredibly deep, subtle art form.
And the masks, the new men, are so striking. What's their role?
They're essential. They don't just hide the actor's face. They embody the character, old man, young woman, god, demon. Each mask, like the Okina mask for old men in ritual plays, or the beautiful komote for young women, carries so much meaning. The actor has to bring it alive.
It sounds incredibly skillful. What were the early stages like? Were they like the no stages we see now?
Probably simpler, more basic, maybe using nature itself, like pine trees as a backdrop. We know they used a hashigakari.
That's the bridge-like walkway.
Yeah, leading onto the main stage area. It's symbolic, like a passage between worlds. Some old screen paintings, like the Rakuju Rakugaizu, suggest performances might have even happened outdoors, maybe on the Kamo riverbed in Kyoto.
Wow, performing by the river. Quite a different feel. And what were the guiding principles? What was Ziemi aiming for?
Well, Zimi wrote a lot about no theory, especially in his Fushi Kaiden. He talked about shijitsu, realism, capturing the truth of human feeling, but also Yugen.
Yugen. That's a key term, but hard to define, isn't it?
It really is. It suggests something deep, subtle, mysterious, a kind of profound, graceful beauty, maybe with a touch of sadness or awareness of impermanence. It's at the heart of No's aesthetic. And the plays Kanami and Ziemi wrote are still the core of the repertoire today. Their influence is immense.
So No really transformed during this period. Did its audience change too?
It did. Initially strongly linked to temples and shrines, it gradually found more and more favor with the Buke, the warrior class. They appreciated its refinement, its themes.
And did ordinary people get to see it?
Increasingly, yes. Both Noah and its partner, Kyujin the Short, comic plays often performed between No pieces, became popular with a wider audience. Kyugin's humor and satire had broad appeal.
So wrapping this up, it's clear the Kitayama period was just this incredible melting pot. You've got the elegance of the old court, the sometimes wild energy of the rising warriors.
Mixed with profound shifts in religion, philosophy, the arts, all happening against this backdrop of political change.
Yeah. It's a complex picture, but the art and literature from the time really give us, a fantastic window into it all, a truly transformative moment in Japanese history.
Absolutely. And maybe something for you, the listener, to think about. This blend in Kitayama culture, elegance and extravagance, tradition and upheaval. How often do we see periods of great social change producing really unique and lasting cultural forms? Can you think of parallels in other times or places you've studied?